And we are live. All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in today. I'm sitting here with Stephanie Anderson from Grace Hill. And from Grace Hill, and senior executive in the multifamily business, lots of years, 18 years, I think I saw your LinkedIn profile in the multifamily side of things. So bringing lots of experience in terms of the conversation. Reminder for everybody, in terms of getting to LES, what we do focus here on getting LES side LinkedIn episodes is to talk about how we're selling today. And the important thing here is how I was talking to sellers about multifamily or in SFR and talking about how the buyer's journey has changed a little bit, right? It's gone from being this persuasive sell, maybe even talking about the fear of missing out into the fear of faux foo. I think someone mentioned it the other day, but basically focusing on how we can provide value over and over again by creating partnerships. So kick it off as we always do, Stephanie, a little bit about yourself and how you got in this role, and then what's the problem you guys solved at Grace Hill?
Okay, that's a loaded question.
It
So
is a loaded
first
question.
First and foremost, I'm a mom of 4 and a wife. I reside in Richmond, Virginia, a little small town in the suburbs outside of there. I'm born and raised in Richmond, Virginia, so I am partial to it. People come and visit and say it's very rich in history and culture, which it is, but I'm also very much a homebody. So love to travel, but absolutely would never leave Richmond, Virginia. It's definitely where my heart is for sure. Like you said, I've been in the industry for almost 19 years now. I started like many just working part-time as a leasing consultant with no real intentions to ever be in this business. It's not something that you're in grade school and you say, hey, mom and dad, I cannot wait to be a property manager. And somehow it just kind of sucks you in. In fact, I even had a big girl job, as I'll call it, out of college and still came back to the industry because there was something just so captivating about it and so meaningful. And, all these years I have worked a multitude of positions. I have done startups. I have done small boutique style organizations, large REITs. I, have worked my way up through the property management side and then made a transition many years ago to work for the National Apartment Association, working on that side of the business, the nonprofit world, really trying to get back to the industry. And that was also during a very pivotal time of COVID, which was quite interesting to be there during that
Oh,
point,
wow.
and then made the transition to the supplier side, or the dark side, as they say. And that's where I've been ever since. I am getting ready to celebrate my 4-year anniversary next month with Grace Hill.
Outstanding. So at Grace Hill, I mean, well recognized and obviously in lots of different facets in multifamily. Just share briefly what the problem you guys solve and who's your target, who'd be your LES buyer from a Grace Hill perspective or in your portfolio?
That's really a fluid question because we offer a multitude of products that people don't understand. So if you were to say, what does Grace Hill solve for to maybe the average person, they might tell you, oh, they're a learning management system, because that's probably what we've been most well known for. Is that's where
Mhm.
you take your compliance and industry training and you help career pathing to your team members and really build them up and get them ready for the next step in their career. And that is something that we do, and it is a large portion of what we do, but it is not all that we do. Since the inception of the LMS, we have created a lot of additional products such as policies, mystery shopping, surveys. Really the ultimate goal now of what we want is to have an all-encompassing system, which we now have called Performance HQ, where once everything is fully integrated in that, you as an operator would be able to look into the system and get a full 360 perspective of what's happening at any property, from your mystery shopping. So what's your leasing staff doing and how are they handling sales? So, or do you have a lead problem or do you have a sales problem, right? Helping to figure out that process. You can look at surveys to see resident feedback. Is it a feedback, with staff? Is maintenance work orders not getting taken care of appropriately? You really can look at all of those things, and then connecting the training portion. So really being able to invest in your teams and have them
Mhm.
take the training to help them to get better. So it's really a cool way to see everything. Reputation management is another one. So that way you see, what are people saying about the property? How do people feel about your company? How can you make changes, to your staff or the performance that really enhances the entire company and property? So that's the ultimate goal, is to have all of those. So when you talk talk about targeted audiences, you have an opportunity to target marketers with
Hmm.
reputation management software. You're targeting your learning and development departments. What I've noticed is more recently, some of that learning and development in HR teams are now coupling with your IT systems, and they're becoming more streamlined for one department with companies. So depending on the company size, depending on their culture of their company, your decision maker is going to vary just a little bit, and of course, depending on what product or solution we're trying to solve for them.
And do you guys find yourself when you guys pull from like discretionary budget, or is there a pre-existing budget line item when you're targeting your buyers, your prospects?
Predetermined.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and again, you have to be unique with how you're pulling that information. Where are you applying that money to, and how do you get creative with it? That's really key.
I keep, I've heard from so many people that are using Gracell and they're thrilled with the solution. I find it like super interesting to dig in on, like training itself, like training it, and also people development can often be something that is early to be cut, right? And then but then what I hear over and over again is people that are leaning on Gracell to actually to to multiply the productivity of their people, and they're seeing it as an asset versus something that's just kind of like a nice to have. How do you guys like? How do you do that? Like, how are you making that compelling? Because like it does feel like people development is something that the adage of like, well, what if I train them and they leave? But what if I don't train them and they stay, right? Like, how do you guys position that so successfully? Because you're killing it.
Thanks. I appreciate that compliment. Our team is doing tremendous things, and we have so much more that we are planning to do, so much innovation that is coming. But really, the key is getting people to think beyond the basics. So, the
Hmm.
compliance aspect of what we do is very critical, of course, because that reduces the liability and the risk management. And you've got to have, those boxes that you're checking. Aside from that, though, there's this whole other element that is important for us to share with people, and that's people nowadays when they have the information, the TikTok of the world, right, where you can learn anything you need to know about a particular topic to be dangerous enough in 60 seconds or less. You have to think about that in the way that your people are going to obtain information whether you give it to them or not. So the
Yeah.
key here is you've got to be successful in elevating their knowledge and giving it to them in a way that they feel rewarded by that, because you're investing in them. It is an investment in their future, and when they see it in that manner, it helps them to want to create that loyalty with the company. They want to stay there. They want to grow with that company. But you've got to just not set and forget it. When people talk about LMS systems and, yes, we're checking a box. Yes, we've got it. You've got to have career pathing in place. You have to stay up to date with content. Our content team is constantly working on the newest, latest, and greatest information, because you can't just say, oh, this is how we did it a couple years ago. If we learned anything from the pandemic, it's that everything that we knew is no longer relevant, and things are changing constantly. So we have to keep that information updated, and then tell these companies you want to invest in your people, because that's honestly going to improve your performance of your property. They've got to have that information, and it's got to be at their fingertips, right? You can't just say, well, I'll give it to them when it's convenient for me.
Yeah. And do you find like, when you take a look at those, like those buyers, like what's going on in their business? Like often like, external forces can make you choose to do something different, or, like things are changing, which cause you to change. Like what is going on that they seek out a I mean, I feel like I'm just like downgrading when I say LMS, but like a LMS system to help train their people. Like, what are they looking to solve for? What's going on in their business?
There's a couple of things. One is that they know that they want to educate their team members, because you're only as good as your weakest link. And with so
Hmm.
much legislation that's out there right now, obviously we just had an election year last year, and that was huge because housing has been at the top in the forefront of that.
Hmm.
And so if you're not training your people about what's happening and keeping them relevant and up to date, you're really putting your business at risk. So that's a huge part of it, is that risk mitigation and really just helping. The other thing is you want want to invest in your teams and train them, but you want to have a sophisticated program, because what happens is we know that this industry is high turnover. We know that every time we
Hmm.
get a new employee, it's a minimum of $4,000 right out of our pocket as owners and operators, because you have to retrain people and you've got to have a startup time for them to get on and get acquainted and all the things. And you're really missing out. So that's money out of your pocket immediately. This allows you, a sophisticated system like Grace Hill allows you to not only have our content, which is going to cover your risk management, it's also going to help them to elevate their knowledge and what they're doing in their career pathing. But then you can also have them input customized training into there. So personalize that training into the system. So if you have directors of training and VPs of training and development, and they're excellent, they can't train every single person, but they can create programs that then input into our system that is then going to help with training a large mass of people at any given time in a sophisticated way.
Now, this is going to sound obvious, but like, what happens if you don't train your people? I know it sounds
Well,
silly to ask. It
you know,
sounds silly to come out of my mouth, but it's not. People don't
and
get trained.
it is. And, sometimes we do have these conversations, especially with owners in your smaller management companies, because they find that their profit margins at times can be a lot smaller. And they say,
Mhm.
okay, or I've had the same team members. We have great tenure here. What could we possibly need to train them on? They've got all the basics, the properties are successful. Obviously we're going to ask them, well, how do you define success? Because that's always a big question. Could you be more successful? Could you be making more revenue? Could you keep your people longer and more educated? But the risk management side is always going to come into it as well, because if you're not investing in training for your teams, you are putting your company and yourself at risk for lawsuits and liability and things of that nature, because the information is changing so rapidly. So it's not a silly question, because believe it or not, there are people that say marketing and learning and development are the two areas that we've got to cut the budget on, right? Because when we're looking at our operating expenses, we're noticing that, we've got to have bigger profit margins. What are we going to cut back on? Well, let's cut back on those departments. And that's
Mhm. And so when so then when you take a look at what your like principal hook is it going to be around productivity or is it around compliance?
a little bit of both. I mean, ultimately, our goal is to increase the property and the people
Yeah.
performance. Focusing on the people element, because that's such a huge part of our business. But now with the Performance HQ element and being able to tie all of these products together so that they're speaking to one another better, so that you get that overall picture, it then helps you as you're going into budgeting season, as you're doing your strategic planning, to be able to hone in on exactly what that property needs. And maybe that
Hmm.
is the people, maybe it is the training, maybe it's you're just not offering the resident package, or you're not as competitive with others, properties in that area. Whatever the case may be, it helps give you that view, which I think a lot of places don't have nowadays.
Hmm. Hmm. So you take a look at your yeah. So it sounds to me. So who do you prefer to sell to, like owners or operators?
Operators is typically what we would sell to more so
Yeah,
than owners.
and
Again, it's
owners.
going to depend on kind of how that hierarchy is with the independent companies, but the majority of the time it's operators.
And then what's the role? Like, is it the regionals or is it in the operator level or is it the PM? Who is
So
it?
we don't focus just on properties. I know some companies are going to focus on, let's sell this property by property. In order for you to see full results, you've got to increase the property and performance of your entire portfolio. So when you
Hmm.
look at it that way, we're really looking above regionals. So regionals, we want their buy-in, we want to help educate them, but realistically, that targeted buyer for us is going to be a VP or higher, depending on what that particular product is that they're
And
purchasing, what department it falls in.
they're looking to lever up the entire organization wall to wall, right? From leasing through to, let's say like we move out, make readies. So I do like, given what we sell into the maintenance side of things, I have been having a lot of conversations lately around training at the maintenance level. And one thing that we're trying to figure out is like, what does the job look like in 3, 4 years from now? If we feel as though, or at least my thesis is that we're, and it's a particular pain point because in the maintenance area, you've got high turnover rate, you've got kind of like this, like it's an undefined career path, but a necessity to have at all times regardless, right? And we're trying to think through, are we actually training them to do the job that needs to be done a year from now, 2 years from now? What does a job, what does a job description look like 2, 3 years from now? Because it's going to change given all the influence of all the technologies happening right now. And this is probably one of the last roles to be kind of like really digitized. How do you guys structure your programming when you look at, this is actually a bit of a, maybe even a plea for help. How can the programming change to look towards the future versus what's kind of been the conventional job roles?
It's going to change significantly. And especially as we're hearing companies going to centralized maintenance models and how much success they're having with it. For our platform specifically, we are trying to, how do we get the education in front of the maintenance team members? Because you know how it goes. You hire maintenance, and sure, they have a particular skill set, but honestly, it's kind of day by day for them. They're learning as they go. So, how are you investing them in a way that they can easily access the information? When I look back to being on site 10 years ago and thinking about having to take our maintenance teams out of what their element is, bringing them into the office, sitting them at a desktop or a laptop and having them do training, it was not realistic. They became immediately disengaged and it wasn't something that they enjoyed doing, which meant they weren't retaining that information in a positive manner. We have a partnership with SkillCat now, and SkillCat, I don't know if you're familiar with that product or not, but it is 100% focused on the maintenance side of things, and they can take their training right there on a mobile device. So they can really take it anywhere, and it's quick training, it's very technical related, and it's going to help them not only what they're doing today in their job, but how do you get to that next step? As you're looking forward, when we think about our policies that we have, thinking about how they are 100% customized to your company. So if you have a centralized maintenance or you are thinking of going to that manner, we can help you develop those policies that are going to get you there, those job descriptions that are going to get you there, because you've got to plan for those things. And I think one of the biggest mistakes we make as owners and operators is we are worried about day to day because everybody's super busy. And if we're looking ahead 6 months to a year, we're doing really good. That's the mindset.
Do you find that like when you take a look at like when I look at people's bios and chatting with everybody in the industry, I often hear the career path, like leasing agent, property manager, and then regional asset, and then et cetera. Like, how do you train? Or does your programming allow people to learn for that next step? Because they also hear, I'll say they also is that there's a gap in management expertise after that operational experience layer. So maybe your personal experience, or how does Gracell solve that problem? Is the problem as manifests itself as it feels, or is it really a big gap, or all those things?
It's really a big gap. That's why we talk a lot about upscaling at Grace Hill, is because it's so important that you are planning for the future. I know that we have a lot of long-term veterans that in this industry believe that they're going to be there unless a bus hits them, but you should have somebody at any given point in time to be able to step in and, fulfill the next level or the next position at any point. And that's where your career pathing is so important, is getting people to that level. Now, you brought up a really interesting point that is not talked about enough. When I was coming up through the ranks, it was no different than you were a leasing consultant, you were an assistant property manager, and so forth and so on. There was not an option of, oh, yeah, you really like this, you like that. One of the things that I always thought was so great was our CEO, Kendall Pretzer, sat me down many years ago before I ever started working for Grace Hill. And she said, what do you love about what you do? What would you want to do more of that you're already doing or that you're not doing enough of? And I remember thinking, well, that's such a silly question in my mind because, if we could all do what drove us, what our why was, what our passion is, would it really be considered a job? Would it be work? But what she's trying to get me to, and she does this with anyone who works under her, is she's trying to get you to the point of figuring out exactly where that sweet spot is, what you're really great at, and then how do we get you to do more of it? Because it's not just that passion that's driving it, but everything else comes with it. You're becoming specialized in that one area. And that's essentially what centralization is, right? It's specialization. Paul put in the comments over here, which is so key, is that you're hiring specialists, you're having them focus on one thing for a particular portfolio or cluster of properties, rather than having one person do all the maintenance tasks at one community. So you're really focusing on what people do really, really well, because nobody's perfect. We would like to think we can all do everything great, but realistically we can't.
I find it's interesting, like this transition from generalist to specialist is creating a lot of, to Paul's comments, it's creating gaps in comfort because you're going from somebody who is just, I would say, who's got this the warm blanket for the property, and now they're specializing in certain things. This, I mean, and let's be, and I think some of the most important things to call out is not just specialists for the tasks they're doing. Then we can pay them more, right?
Mhm.
And create a career path that matches a lifestyle expectation, right? Or at least progression in their personal lives. Whereas we're keeping them inside of a generalist box, it's very difficult for us to actually pay them more because they're, there's just an absence of what they're, well, there's just very little competitiveness for what they do, what they're doing. And so I'm a huge proponent of the specialist career, this the specialist paths for solving problems. But there still is this belief that we need to have this warm blanket around all the time. So how do you see that changing? Or how does that, what's your experience around this transition from generalist, available around all the time to specializing in certain skill sets?
I think it's about conversation first and foremost, that communication of telling people, because change is so uncomfortable, myself included. One of the most powerful things that someone did in my career when I was an assistant property manager is my manager came over to me and she told me to get up from my desk. And, your desk is kind of like your safe space. You knew where everything was, you did. And she goes, I'm going to let you work out of this desk over here for today, which was in another kind of office setting, more on the leasing side. And immediately, what do you think happened? I was thrown off. I didn't have my same supplies there. I felt like the keyboard didn't work the way I wanted it, and the desk layout was different. I didn't have my favorite pen. And, that was really an intricate moment for me at that time. It really ticked me off in my mind because I'm like, this sucks. Like I could do better over there. But it's sort of like that book, Who Moved Your Cheese or Who Moved My Cheese.
Yep.
It gets you out of your comfort zone, taking off that warm blanket and changing things up. Now, it doesn't have to be a physical desk. The idea is get out of your comfort zone, do something different because you're never going to know what you do the best anyway or what you love about what you do until you change things up and do it different. And it's sort of like, when you work on site and there would always be the idea that, hey, let's have maintenance and leasing switch for a day. Let's have them work. And so that way you could earn that mutual respect of, because everybody thinks they have the harder job than someone else. But
Sure.
all of a sudden, when you have to do it, you're realizing, well, wow, they do have some things that aren't so glorious and wonderful. But you're learning that, and then it makes you appreciate what you have more. And it just teaches people again that, like, stop getting in that same cycle every single time because we all do it. What do you do when you get home every day from work? You probably do the same thing and you don't realize it because you're just going through the motions. You've got to
Mhm.
break people of that. And the way to do it is to start redefining what their roles are and where you need the most help at the property. So when I talk about the systems that Grace Hill offers and being able to look at things like surveys, which I will preach surveys all day long. I don't care if you ask them to write it on a piece of paper versus a sophisticated program. You are assuming what other people think, know, and feel, and you can't do that. You have to take that data and use it in a meaningful way. And so
Mhm.
the beauty of it here is that you're collecting information from the teams, the residents, the property, and then you're making decisions based on that information. And that's the only way that you're ever going to, one, get people out of that comfort zone, take off that blanket, and then get them to open their eyes to what could be versus what is.
What do you guys, how do you guys, so one of the things that we're trying to close the gap on is comfort with the change that's happening. So like I'll often tell people, or I share an opinion, I guess, is that sales is change, right?
Mhm.
And training is also change, right? And so this we're nudging people into areas of discomfort. Obviously, a big thing that's happening right now is AI. Now, I was just having conversations. So I'm at NMHC right now and had conversations with folks just the other day about, I really need to rethink. I think we need to rethink how we're training and recruiting maintenance folks, and specifically around how AI is going to affect their job, and do it in a way that can make AI less uh, threatening, right? So how can we make it so that it's more oriented around the benefits, the person, the end user, right? Not a replacement thing. How do you guys like? And again, given the Grace Hill, like I said, I've heard over and over again how successful it is. People are excited when they buy Grace Hill because of the problems that it's going to solve. Do you guys take on that AI like education piece and start telling? And is that there? Is that part of your programming, or is that something that operators need to ask for? How can we start bringing people along the way?
So, yes, you got to invest in AI. And I think it's a twofold here of how you're doing that. So, how we're doing it at Grace Hill is we have Gracie, if you haven't heard of her. Gracie is our
Right.
chatbot. Who is AI, and she is just all encompassing of all the knowledge, mostly meaningful to your site teams, as far as when they need information from a training course or a policy or anything that they need. You ask Gracie, and she gives it to you immediately based on your company's policies, procedures, and training. So that information becomes at their fingertips. So Gracie's almost a friend, a coworker, a colleague, a confidant, someone that they can relate to and that is easy to use. So they don't feel threatened by Gracie, which is one of the ways that you want to approach it. The other thing that you need to do is you've got to invest in your team members in terms of what their AI knowledge is, because things are always scary when it's the unknown. If you don't understand something, you become very judgmental of it or standoffish. And so
Hmm.
our team, I would say about, I think it's like 70, some of us are going through at Grace Hill this 4-week process. We just wrapped it up earlier today. And one of the things that we're doing each week is we have this sophisticated system through a third party consultant, and we're learning how we use AI in our own particular roles. So, how are you using it in your job? What cool things can you do? And it really gets into the weeds of you don't need a coding background, you don't need all this IT knowledge to be able to do these things. And then you can figure out, did it make your life easier or better? Or was it more work? Or was it not beneficial? Or did it not give you the results that you needed? And so I really envision that as our training adds more AI into it, and our systems add more AI, that we're going to see our knowledge that we're learning through this program that's going to be applied to our customers and their systems, which I'm very excited about.
Because like one of the things about AI that at least we find interesting is that you don't really know how it can help you out until you start using it on a regular basis. And you may, and also there's a bit of a the change won't affect me. I love the who move your cheese reference, but like it's not gonna affect me. It's gonna affect other people.
Yep.
And so speak to maintenance again. On the maintenance side of things, you might think that, oh well, I can see how AI could affect leasing or maybe admin or ops, but it's not going to affect maintenance, right? And
Yeah.
meanwhile, like you explained, your Gracie, we have a chatbot as well, Cyrus, and it's similar things, right? So how do you surface things easier, faster, more accurate? And really a big one that we solve for is consistency. Because a lot of things that people think or the way people do things is based on their own personal experience, not so much in how the organization wants that to be, how it wants to be done. And so consequently, that creates a bunch of gaps. And so, like what we're learning from a AI side of things is that when you go to teach people about what AI can do, they often are like, "Oh my!" Like they're shocked because they just can't believe that it can solve something in their context, but they can see it in other people's context. How do you guys do that at Grace Hill? Like, how do you educate people on that?
It's a great question. One of the things that I think is the easiest to educate them on is the conversational matter in which AI exists.
Mhm.
The more that you converse with any sort of AI tool, the more that it understands your tone, your language, your needs, your wants,
Mhm.
your deliverables, those types of things. And I think Gracie does just that, right? She is conversing with people, she understands what they're asking for, and then she's delivering based on what that ask is for. I think as we continue on, more of our training will become more about AI and some of the skills that are necessary for it, because I feel like there is a lot of information out there about AI. And I'll tell you, going through this program that I'm going through now with our internal teams, I thought I knew a good amount of AI. I can tell
Mhm.
you that some of these programs, and some are paid, some are free. I'm just blown away by it. It's honestly scary, to be honest, of like
It
how
is.
much AI knows and how much it can do. But I think just it comes also with the culture of the organization. So our client companies making sure that they are leading with not fear of AI, and leading with encouragement for their teams that it's going to be beneficial to the business. It's not going to take their jobs. It's going to be coupled with that human intelligence that's really going to push them forward and take some work off of their plate, right? And who doesn't want to hear
For
that?
sure. Yeah, for sure. So then the other kind of big conversation that's been happening over the last couple of years is centralization. And you brought it up earlier. Like when you take a look at centralization, that is also a new skill set. Like, how do you prepare organizations for what centralization can mean for their career paths? What to do? Like managing a centralized team is very different than managing, being jumping to the pump within a single building. So how do you bring that along, or even share what centralization can do?
One of the things we do is we look at best practices or what clients that we already have are doing and where they're finding the most success. When we do our policy implementation meetings and we sit down with clients and we're talking about if they're saying, hey, we're moving towards centralization or we're already doing centralization and we're writing policies with them for their company, it's one of the things we can compare what they're currently doing against industry best practices. And so that's really a very important factor to know that it's reassuring if you're already meeting those best practices or exceeding them. And if you're not there, having someone to help you along to rethink about things. I
Mhm.
think one of the things that our teams do really, really well in terms of our customer success and our sales is they ask the great questions. They ask the provoking questions of like, what are you doing right now? And what are your ultimate goals? Because our goal is that we want to solve your pain. And in order to figure out what that looks like or how we're going to get you to that next level, we have to fully understand what those pains are for you. And it teaches them to really look inside to find what those pains are and then how we can solve for them and then educating them on how to get the most out of their products.
So you find that, like, one thing that I like, and I am a big fan of training, obviously, and coaching, and so and that kind of like change that helps people. Do you find the training that's put together right now, or other alternatives out there? Like, I often see that it's prescribed around like what the organization is looking for, rather than what the person is looking for. And like, if you could change your training, or if you could have an impact with somebody, what would you like to see that person feel after they go through a Grace Hill course or go through a curriculum?
I want them to feel excitement. I want them to feel that they have gained something because, people are going to come and go, jobs are going to come and go, companies are going to come and go. But that knowledge that you gain is something so instrumental that you take with you for the rest of your career and your life. And I don't think that people always think about it because the culture in some companies is you must do this training. You can't get your bonus unless you do your training.
Mhm.
You can't, come to work or answer a phone or do anything unless you've completed this training successfully. And I'm not saying that those are wrong things because those are still important for your business in terms of operations and a checks and balances. But I think there has to be that whole separate side of really getting people excited about the knowledge and then how do they apply it? Something so simple that you'll see people do on LinkedIn is they will share a badge that they have earned for a program that they
Mhm.
created or completed. And that is so exciting to them because they get to show pride that they have learned something and that they are expanding their career and expanding their knowledge. And I love that. And I feel like there needs to be so much more of that. So when you do little things like that, like awards, we have a brand new awards program within our system at Grace Hill. And it's been so exciting. We've always done awards because, gamification's always been huge and, friendly competition is great. But how are you incorporating that to where people feel like they have really mastered something and that the knowledge is just not checking a box or it's not because my boss said I had to, but it's because I got to do something and I got to learn from it. And then now I have something shiny to show for it in a
Mhm.
meaningful way.
Mhm. And that has a sense of fulfillment, right?
100%.
Completion,
Right.
which is like a
Which keeps
fundamental human
employees
skill.
happy, right? And that reduces your turnover. It's this whole cycle that we go through.
Yeah. When you guys are looking for prospects, what is it? What typically do you have? I'll put it this way: what is typically happening? Like, are they looking to grow? Are they looking to scale? Like, are they looking to save costs? Like, what's forcing them to change and say, hey, I need an LMS. What's happening in their business that they wake up and they go, I really hate buying software. I really hate buying training programs, but today's the day I've got to do something about it. I'm typing into Google, how do I find a property management LMS? What's happening in their lives?
I would say the past couple of years, one thing that has been top of mind to a lot of our potential buyers has been that whole idea of a single tech stack. You know, I'm sure you've heard it a million times.
Yeah, yeah.
And we went through a period of time where that's all people said was beneficial, right? Put everything into a single stack. That's what makes the most sense because all the systems are going to communicate. You don't have to worry about the APIs individually. You know, everything's going to work together and it's going to be smooth sailing. At the end of the day, everybody is not the best at what they do. It's sort of that specialization, right, that we talked about in terms of employees. When you go to get your hair cut, are you getting a pedicure there too? Are you also going to get your physical done, you know, because it makes sense to, you know, have your blood work done and get your full physical. And maybe you can
Sure.
have your makeup done and maybe you can actually buy a new pair of jeans there too, right? That mindset of like, it's not a one-stop shop. It never should be for anything. And your idea should be a consolidated tech stack, not a single stack. Tech stack. I will die on that hill because it will never make sense ultimately to your business model. So now that we've
I
moved
do like
past
that.
and people are understanding that a little bit more. We still have more people to help get them there, but people are more open to yes, that makes more sense to have a consolidated tech stack with several companies that have API integrations that work well together, and it makes sense for our business model. I would say the next thing that usually makes them want to have a conversation is pricing. Like, can I get a better price? Or I'm currently using this system and I don't see the value there. So those types of conversations really, you know, bring up what should we be doing as we specialize these roles that we're talking about. Then
Mhm.
it becomes, okay, who's going to be the system administrator? They come on and they say, we need a program in place, you know, some sort of software that's going to help us do X, Y, and Z for our goals to meet these pain points. So that's kind of, you know, I know that's not too formative of an answer in terms of what people are looking for because we have several different buyer personas with several different products. But I would say that's kind of like that thought process of what they go through, depending on what stage they're at in their company growth.
Given the shape of kind of like the operator market, and so like it's very very long tail shaped. Respect to is there's probably 90% of the business is managing stuff that's in the 15,000 or 20,000 units.
Mhm.
I don't have the data here, but something that's shaped like that. How do you what's the penetration rate or adoption rate of LMSs in property management?
I mean, I can't give you an exact, but
Ballpark,
I would tell
yeah.
you really big. I mean, over 75%.
Are
You
running
know,
LMSs.
yes,
Okay.
because it's that training aspect. And we do meet with companies who say, well, we have our own training department that wants to go out and train team members and they want to be very much involved, sort of like regional trainers, and they can onboard every single new employee and they can do orientations and continuous training and things of that nature. But then what do you do in terms of the paper trail, so to speak? How are you
Mhm.
keeping up with your compliance in a system? Because one, you're going to get a lawsuit at any given point in time. It's never if, it's when, because that's just housing and how it exists. So, where's your paper record? You know, when you have to go to court to defend any of the lawsuits or litigation that you're going through, you need to be able to show who's taken what courses, when they took them, all of those things. You know, outside of that, again, you don't want to be very paperwork heavy. If your teams are really involved in the engagement of your people and getting them to the next level in their career, the only way you can do that is having a sophisticated system that's going to allow them to have all of that information in there. And one of the cool things about Grace Hill is that that information stays in the longevity of it. So when you look at the LMS system, you know, I still have records with Grace Hill because I have personally used Grace Hill since 2006. Every company I went to, I have been an administrator for them, a learner, all the things throughout all of the years. Sometimes I didn't get a choice whether we picked Grace Hill or not. Sometimes I did. It didn't matter. I have this long record to show of everything that I've ever taken throughout my entire career, and I think that's pretty cool.
Oh wow, that's very interesting. So you can actually have kind of like your passport, if you will, or
Yeah,
report card on what you've
yeah,
done.
that's right.
Very, very interesting. Do you find that people like to your point about training, right? Where people feel like they take training because of compliance and their boss told them to do so. Are there folks that opt in on training and they kind of pursue different career paths?
For sure they do. And we see that in two different ways. So we have what's called like a book bag, you know, inside of Grace Hill where you can go in and personally add any classes that you want. So if you wanted to invest in different things, now, of course, your bosses can also go in and say, okay, you know, you need to take curb appeal, you need to take, you know, advanced leasing skills or something to that nature, right? Because they feel like you didn't pass your shop. Or we also have those that automatically, when you have multiple products with us, if you didn't do well on your mystery shop, it will tell you which courses you need to take to elevate your training. So you have that option to go in your backpack and see. And again, you can get any of the training courses in there. So it's not like you're paying individually for them. So if you're working for the Greystar of the world and you're working at Property A and you're going in and you can sign up to take any course that you want, and it's all self-paced. So you're doing it on your own time as it works for you. Visto, which is our partnership with the National Apartment Association, is very much on the same wavelength as that. People are opting in every single day to get their credentials to take, human trafficking's through the roof right now, those courses, because it's Human Trafficking Awareness Month. It's very much top of mind to people every January, and they say, let me go in and get my refresher, or let me learn more about human trafficking. And they go in there and they purchase that individual course. So people are definitely opting in. You'll see it. LinkedIn Learning is another play. People are so thirsty for knowledge. And if you don't give it to them, they're going to go out and find it on their own.
Right. And what makes work complicated when everyone trains on a single concept, but in different ways. They have different language, they have different kind of like ways of doing things. And that just creates more complications.
It creates way more complications. You want to streamline what you're doing with efficiency, but also the consistency and how everyone is adapting to that information. Really important.
When your buyers are looking at or considering, in the sales world, I mean, for those who are listening, and everyone's had a deal slide out through the quarter or just slide out the side of the funnel. Like, what is the best thing you could ever possibly have is like a time wall, right? Where you actually, they need to do something by a certain time. Is there a time wall in your business?
Yes. We have really high goals. We have, where we want to hit our goals throughout the entire year, for revenue and company and so forth. It gets tricky though, because we know that when you're changing your tech stack, you're getting any type of software, it's not an easy decision for people to make. In fact, we have to have call after call after call at times, depending on that hierarchy in their organization, because we have to we sell one person on it, but now we got to sell their boss and then their boss's boss and so forth. And really getting that to the finish line can be challenging at times, because everybody thinks differently and they have different goals in terms of what their positions are and how this particular product would serve them. You have people that what we call our champion within companies, where we know that they see 100% of the benefits of what we're offering, but then we have others that champion has to work with us to get it through that finish line. So, we have deals that we can close in a couple of weeks, and then we have deals that, we see year over year with. I love looking at events. You're at NMHC right now. Any events that we go to, NMHC, NAA, TAA, you name them, as we go to those events and you're having these really critical conversations with people and you're selling your value, seeing those come to fruition maybe 12 months later, because they are big decisions for companies to make, not because of the price. The price I think people expect to pay. I really think it comes down to the lift, because integrating new technology into any apartment management company is a lot of daggone work. And getting everybody on board with that and setting a realistic timeline for that implementation can be a little bit tricky there. So I think that that's sometimes why we see those longer time frames.
Longer time frames. And what kind of what objections do you typically hear? I know it's like the worst question ever.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, the number one that we get is, I want it all in one system.
Really?
I want to use my PMS that can have educational content. Yes, I know it's not to your level of content, because I told you our content is unmatched in this industry. I will die on that hill. It is unmatched, but I get where they're saying like, well, if we could just have that one system where it's our PMS, but then it also can have an LMS element. And then we can also tie in our websites, our marketing websites to it. That's their thought process. Again, it doesn't make sense in the long run, because you're not getting the best in class for each product, but they see it as ease of use, because when you look at your technology departments and they know that change is not easy for our property management on-site teams, and you've got to go and train them on a new system and a new technology. And then that whole cycle I told you about, where they get disengaged and they want to leave and this and that. Yeah, they're thinking about how do we make decisions that is going to not impact our people in a negative manner, because that ultimately affects the performance. So I would say that's probably one of the biggest objections that we get. And we have to go into, looking at, yes, you could get your surveys from this company and you could have your PMS. Cause I'll tell you, we're never going to go into the PMS world. We don't want to. It's
Mhm.
not, it's not that, that's a question we get. No, we don't want to, because we're really good at what we do and we're going to continue to be really good at it. And that's what makes us better. That's our differentiator into the industry.
It is interesting. Like I just had a conversation yesterday around an RFP that's coming out. This is a prospect I've been working with for a while, and the RFP's coming out, and they kind of want us to partner with, or they suggested that we contact another vendor to partner with, because there could be a better synergy there, because we don't do everything, right? And so it is kind of interesting, because the ask is I want everything and I want it the best, but it's just not that way. And so it's like, as vendors, we need to work together to figure out ways to make it easy to be bought and solve that problem, get a solution level rather than a bunch of different parts. Because no one wants to have a frank experience of all these things that are all sewn together and, with visible seams, et cetera.
It's true. And you know what? Sometimes
So,
those partnerships do turn into purchasing of companies. Last September, we decided to purchase Reolink. If you're familiar with Reolink, it's the video
mhm,
software company who had a very sexy brand, had an amazing product that is just having a huge impact on revenue for leasing teams across the country. And, people were shocked when we acquired that company, because they thought, what does this have to do with policy surveys? Yeah, a little bit of reputation management, but it's kind of out there on its own. And it's like, no, you don't understand though. It's kind of like that full comprehensive system we're looking for outside of the PMS. Because if you're doing leasing, online leasing and tours, and, engaging your residents with videos, how do we then tie that back to our training system and our policies? Because you got to have policies on it and you got to be able to train your teams properly on it. It makes
mhm.
perfect sense. And once people hear about it in that manner, they're like, oh, yeah. But at the time, some people don't think like, oh, that makes complete sense. But again, it's all about improving the people and performance. And it goes back to that every time.
Very, very, very interesting. Okay, so then as we kind of wrap this up a little bit, so you've mentored people before in your life. Obviously, you're in the coaching and training space. You're at NAA, and you're selling all the time. And as you kind of progress in your career, what's the one piece of advice you'd give other sellers that are looking to kind of see what hell yes looks like? How can they recognize that moment? What would you suggest?
I think that if you have not worked in this business and have not worked on site a day in your life, I'm not saying you have to go and do that, right? Because that doesn't necessarily make you successful. What I am saying is you've got to have a great understanding of what the pain points and challenges are for the owners and operators, more so than just your products. So if you are selling, valet trash, for example, yes, you need to fully understand that, right? Because you're selling that product. But how does that improve the operational efficiency of their property for all aspects of it, not just the trash removal and the resident engagement, right? How else does that help all the elements of it? And really understanding. And the best way for you to gain that knowledge is to go to events. And I know that that is hard for some companies because they send a limited amount of people and it is an expense.
Hmm.
But when you go to NMHC and NAA events, you get to sit in the room with owners and operators and hear what those challenges are. You have to be a great
Hmm.
listener. You don't need to talk. You need to listen to what they're saying. And I would say 90% of the time, the challenges that I hear don't even directly apply to what we solve for at Grace Hill, right? Because if they're talking about fraud, yes, we do, training on fraud and things. But if they were looking for, let's say, a platform for fraud, for resident checks, and background checks and things of that nature, that wouldn't be us, right? We're not doing it. We're not in that space. However, me knowing that that is a number one concern, insurance increase in cost, right? That was
Hmm.
huge last year and continues to be huge this year. If I know that that's a thing, that needs to be something that I'm talking to owners and operators about, because that gives me the relatability and they know that I understand their concerns overall. I'm not just there to make a sale for this one product. I'm here to understand what they're experiencing and how we can help. And I think that some suppliers are doing that really, really well. But if more could do it, I think that that is a key, is that knowledge, grasping the information. There's a million webinars webinars out there. Grace Hill hosts a free webinar every single month, sometimes 2 to 3 a month, where we're talking about trends and thought leadership and things happening. Join those webinars, join what people are doing and what they're talking about. LinkedIn Live, just like what we're doing here right now, it doesn't cost them a thing but their time. And that time can be used so wisely to grasp this information and then apply it to what they're doing. And I promise you, you'll be so much better for it in the end. So grab the information every chance you get.
I think so. And just, I want to make sure I heard you correctly. It's like, and no one else has actually said this. And I want to make sure I call it out. It's understanding your comment about fraud, their scope of priorities, because their priorities might not be what you sell.
100%.
Right. And so if it is fraud, know that that's what's their number one concern. I mean, right now, it could be remediation right now if you've got a lot of Southern California properties, or it could be remediation if you've got a lot of places in Tampa, right?
Yes.
So empathy around their priorities so that you can come conversation and be mindful of what they're thinking about.
Absolutely. Knowing this information also helps when it comes to they have to make budget cuts. Companies have to make budget cuts. So it's going to help you to still sell your value because you have a greater understanding of all of the challenges that they're going through. And I just think that it helps them to know that you are there to support them in a matter of ways, not just what's specific or self-serving to you.
Oh, I love it. I love it. That is something that is often overlooked, right? Because we
I
just think
agree.
about things that are in our scope of change versus what the change they're going through. Barry, who moved your cheese? Spencer, was it Spencer Johnson? That's the author.
You
Maybe
remember that
very,
more than
very
I do.
happy.
I remember the book, but just not the author. Note
Yeah,
to self.
there you go. I think I got it right. I may have got it wrong. Who knows?
Oh,
This has been
someone
super
will fact
insightful.
check you. You better believe somebody's
I
gonna
will.
fact check you when they watch this.
Oh, 100%. It's always fearful when I try and remember things long ago. Um, who should we talk to next in this conversation about getting LES?
Oh, wow. Okay. You know, I think that Fetch. Have you talked to anybody from Fetch yet?
No, I've never even heard of Fesh before.
What? Okay. Talk to
All
Fetch.
right.
Talk to Michael, talk to Jake, Zachariah, talk to that company about they're doing some really cool things. And it's package delivery services, but it comes directly to your home. But they've got some new things that are kind of in the works. And
All right.
they have a really cool model and some really innovative things that they're doing in that space that I would love to watch that episode on. So
All right. Very cool. I'll definitely get a hold of those guys. Appreciate that. I love hearing more, hearing about different companies when you're doing new things. Um, how people are interested in following up this conversation with you. What's the best way to get a hold of you?
The easiest is always going to be LinkedIn. I'm pretty responsive on there and they can certainly reach out, send me a message. I love to hear from people. I love to connect with people and, we're always better together. So if they can reach out to me, that's great. Also, email is just as easy. S Anderson, just one word, S Anderson at gracehill.com. And I would just love to talk to people about the industry, what your pain points are. And of course, if we can solve any of those pain points at Grace Hill, I am ready. Our team is ready to talk to you because we are doing really cool stuff. And if you have not seen Grace Hill lately, you have to come see it, because if you still think we're doing the same stuff from 2 and 3+ years ago, you are sadly mistaken in the best possible way.
Outstanding. What a great conversation, a great offer. For everyone listening today that wasn't able to catch the LinkedIn Live, podcast will be up on Apple or Spotify in about a week. Plus the blog post will come out summarizing the conversation. Please like or subscribe on the Spotify or Apple. Really appreciate all of your lift on that. That helps in so many different ways. And of course makes the podcast even better and LinkedIn Live any better. Stephanie, thank you so much for your insights today. It was super valuable. I haven't had a chance to talk to somebody in the LMS side in a very long time. And it's very valuable for everyone to understand the amount of change that you guys enact through communication and education and people development. Outstanding conversation today. Thank you very much for all your time. And thanks everyone for listening. Have a wonderful rest of your day. If you're at NMHC, hydrate, coffees on Starbucks.
I have FOMO, so enjoy Vegas for all of us. I can't wait to hear all your recap when you get back. I know there's a lot of great information and conversations happening there. And thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you.
Oh, it's been outstanding. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Take care.
And then we end the stream.